Let's start with questions from the audience. Any questions?
So, just out of curiosity, devil's advocate, whatever, you've got this guaranteed for 20, 30 years rate. What guarantee is it that your company will still be here 30 years from now?
I can answer that. Well, I guess if we go out of business, you just got a free system sitting out there, so it doesn't really matter. But yes, we will be around for a long time.
That is that after 30 years, is there something in your plan for decommissioning these huge systems?
Yeah, so typically, like in a PPA contract, well, with a lot of the munis, it's a cash deal, so the city owns them anyway, so it's just their system.
The city has to take it down.
Yeah, it's their system. They own it. They're doing O&M on it. It's their equipment. With the power purchase agreement, typically there are clauses that are written in after a certain amount of time where either the city can buy them out or they can decommission them. But a lot of times they'll just buy it outright and then the city will own that equipment because it'll last for like 40 years.
So on the larger project side, generally we'll post a bond with the community, so there'll be money in place at the end of year 25 or 30 to remove the system. With solar, it's literally like a fence post, like an I-beam that's in the ground, so actually taking it out is pretty straightforward. While wind, you have a 500-foot tall tower with a huge foundation. I mean, it's a different decommissioning plan for solar to wind, and a real benefit of solar is the ability of decommissioning. And then, you can get into repowering too, so sort of add to that point about the 30-year life of the project. If you're in year 15 and there's a much better technology that happens with solar, it's very easy to replace a panel, put in a new panel. I think with wind, it's a lot harder because you have a 500-foot tall tower, you need to bring a crane in, and the economics are different. And so I do think that as technology improves inevitably with solar, you will see probably some repowering with the existing infrastructure, different modules in, different inverters, and a real benefit of solar is the ability to make improvements real time. And then your fuel cost is free, so you're not buying gas, coal, and so for your 30-year operations time, projects are actually more valuable in year 15 to 30. You depreciated property values, which is probably your highest operating cost, is paying taxes to the local community. And so if the owner of the project is not around in year, say, 15 or 20, for some whatever issue, generally it's pretty easy to have someone step in. That's happened on certain projects because if you have a PPA for 20, 30 years, there's a revenue line attached to the project, your fuel cost is free, your operating cost is very minimal, and so there's real value out there on the project for someone stepping in, whether or not it's the owner that started in year one. So
on a practical, pragmatic sense, what happens to these mountains and piles of solar panels when they're taken down?
I mean, we don't really know yet. Solar hasn't been installed long enough to know what decommissioning looks like unless, I don't know, unless you have a really bad project that should be taken down. But yeah, and
A lot can be recycled from the modules. So they're basically, an aluminum frame and then some tempered glass. So, there's ways that you can recycle and reuse some of that stuff, but most of the systems that have gone up are just still in existence. Nothing's really been taken down yet.
And I would add, I think the recycle is a good point. It's aluminum glass. It's a little different than coal ash as your sort of waste product or a nuclear rod that's spent sitting there for 10,000 years. So I think, you're going to have to deal with recycling. It's a little different life cycle than, say, a coal plant or a nuke plant at the end of the 30-year life.
Gretchen, do you have something you want to add, or do you have a question?
I have a question, not something to add.
I was going to go back as far as the security from a utility standpoint. One of the things we want to make sure is that it's still performing at the high level. So if the panels, let's say the axis, the tilting action is not working, and for whatever reason they don't want to repair it, well, we still want to get the low-cost energy at that point, and so we'll have some security that says, if you don't do that, you owe us money. So from a utility, we want to be protected too. Go ahead, Gretchen.
Sure. Gretchen Dolson, HDR. I guess since you all work nationwide in addition to in Nebraska, I was going to ask if you could talk about what are some of the specific Nebraska challenges that you face in growing your businesses here.
I can start. I mean, honestly, compared to other states that we work in, Nebraska is significantly easier to develop and finance projects in. There's, you're working with your customer on the offtake side and the interconnection side all in one. And I think in other states with IOUs, that creates a conflict and brings more parties to the table. That makes negotiations significantly harder. And yeah, so for me, Nebraska honestly has been easier to work in compared to other states.
I was going to say one of the challenges we do have is kind of because there are so many PPDs, it's the lack of being able to wheel between the different or the different districts or the REAs, and so I can't put a system over here and just wheel the power to somewhere else. We have to be very territorial about where we place systems. So that's one of our major challenges out here.
And I would say from a utility scale prospect, I mean, load growth, I mean, I know I'm talking, but obviously Facebook data center coming in was great, and that was sort of a binary. We need more renewables. But you want to see load growth, and I think maybe electric vehicles or something that may come. But certainly I think Nebraska's followed a very similar trajectory as other states, where Illinois is a good example, or Texas. Wind came on first. Wind was the cheapest form of energy. A lot of wind got built. Now as solar has come down in costs and transmission areas have gotten constrained out in the far away from load, high wind resource areas, you're seeing solar starting to happen closer to load. And really, community solar generally begins, and then it sort of grows larger and larger and larger. So I think Nebraska is following a lot of the trend lines you see across the U.S. In terms of renewable energy development and energy development in general.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. I think because of the irrigation and farming and ag, the load swings in the middle of the state are a major challenge as well to being able to place solar.
I wonder if there is an initiative that any of you are aware of on your company's side of things that are dedicated towards engaging the community, educating them, bringing them up to speed as to the whole life cycle benefits and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we actually do a lot of community outreach, especially in the towns that we're putting community solar projects in. And Jeff, who's sitting back there, is our Nebraska program manager, and you can see him at events all around the eastern side of the state, just to teach people about the technology and the benefits of solar. So that's something that we feel very, very importantly about, is that you all need to understand where your power comes, and you all need to understand how to use energy the most efficient way you possibly can, and not just for the benefits of being green or anything, but the financial benefits too. And so I spend a lot of time down here. He's always speaking at events. Anna spends a lot of time down here we put on seminar series in conjunction with NPPD and Nebraska Energy Office and a couple other entities. So that's something that we try and do in every community that we work with.
And I think being a public power state makes that even more crucial. You guys know and see where your electricity comes from on a daily basis, whether it's the coal plant down the road or the wind farm. In other states, it's, your utility bill is your utility bill. You don't talk to, your representative or whoever it is on the utility side. So you don't have that understanding of where your power comes from. So that makes the community outreach not harder, but it's just different. Being in a public power state, you guys know and you care, so you want to be a part of the process. And so I think that gets us to do more community outreach because of that too. Your community outreach is on a completely different scale compared to us, but.
Yeah, no, I think what you all said is accurate. I mean, it's just about getting in there early with the community, working with them, and making sure you're meeting their goals. And a lot of these counties, have serious budget issues going on, and attracting investment. And I think renewables is a great way to attract investment without having to provide services. Like if you do a subdivision, which is another way to grow a tax base, you have to provide sewer, school, fire. I mean, all these things that really strain a local economy. With a renewable project, whether it's wind or solar, you're literally just paying property taxes and providing everything else yourself, and just adding tax base that then can be used for roads, bridges, to invest in the local community. They can do that with their own budget and not have to raise taxes on their residents, because that's how they're funding their budgets, is raising property taxes on the individuals living there. And so I think there's a real benefit to renewables in these communities, and about making sure you educate them right. And I think it's something we have to continue to do, is to make sure we're getting those benefits out there in the right way. And I think, Molly and Anna's team working here in the state and have projects up and ground, I think they're really doing a nice job of leading that effort of actual on-the-ground impacts.
There's a couple comments before we break up. First of all, developers, or if you're interested in any type of solar, work very close with your utility on the interconnection. You don't want any surprises. The utility wants to make sure it's safe and reliable. There's typically some studies that have to be done, and to make sure it's done right. The second thing, Tim Texel is here with the Nebraska Power Review Board. If you're adding generation, there are state statutes that make certain requirements. Make sure you as a developer, or if the community, someone needs to work with the Nebraska Power Review Board to make sure that the statutes are followed there, so I'll put a plug in for that. So with that, let's give the presenters a round of applause.